Jasmin Harris is one of those women who just radiates purpose. She's the director of policy and development at the Innocence Center, San Diego, and her work in criminal justice reform and freeing the wrongfully convicted is making a real impact. She's thoughtful, fearless, and she shows us what leadership looks like when it's rooted in compassion and courage. Jasmin, thank you so much for joining us. For those who may not know, tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. First of all, thank you for that introduction. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. It really touched me. So thank you for that.
I meant it.
It's easy work to do, right? When you are surrounded by the people who are just as passionate as me, if not more, surrounded by people who have come home from wrongful incarceration, getting to spend time with them. It really keeps your perspective where I think we all need to be keeping it these days. Um, but yeah, I have a pretty circuitous path as to how I got to this work. I actually was a restaurant owner. That was my first career. I did that for a couple decades, and that I did that until essentially my brother, who's about 5 years older than me, participated in a nonviolent, peaceful protest and had to spend 3 months in federal prison because of that participation. Yeah.
Yikes.
And it was a known thing. They know that when you go to this protest that you will be arrested. That's part of the movement. But it really was for me the first kind of insight I had to an incarcerated person's life. And that was about 15 years ago.
Wow.
And yeah,
But
yeah.
who's counting?
Right, right, right. I know I only look like I'm 20, but no, I'm just kidding. I I started as an intern at an organization called the California Innocence Project. I think I was the oldest intern in the office. And I just said, listen, I'll get your lunch, I'll take out the trash, I'll do whatever I can do to kind of be a part of this movement. And at that time, they really took me under their wing. And I think, being a person who was older and had some life experience kind of helped me get my foot in the door there. And then I just worked my way up. And I'm really glad I did because I think that there are things that you need to learn along the way. There are experiences that you need to have that make you a good leader, that make you fully understand really the breadth of the work and of the organization. And so I just am
Mhm.
so lucky that I was able to take that path to get to where I'm at now.
That's crazy. What a wild story. I don't think I knew that story before. My goodness. So I know that the work you do is heavy and it's incredibly meaningful, but what personally motivates you to like get up and do it every day?
Oh gosh, there is something about the grace that a free or exonerated person has that will change your life. I mean, it's just a constant reminder of perspective, right? Somebody
Hmm.
has been through something so dark, and when they come home and you get to interact with them and you get to be around them and you see them grow and you see them, you know, be successful, it is the biggest motivation in this work. And I will say, even, in the challenging times when clients reach out and are challenged by something, being able to empower them and really learning that our clients, are on the same playing field as us, that they are these incredible humans, brilliant humans that really just got their futures taken away from them. And you can support them on that journey and empowering themselves. Um, it's just an incredible feeling. I mean, it's unmatched. And so, like I said, if anyone listening ever gets a chance to go to an event, go to anything where there's a freed or exonerated person, it'll totally change your life. I imagine you had a similar
Girl, listen, the
situation.
gala, life changing, life changing. My husband and I came home and we were just so steeped in gratitude because they are fabulous, amazing people who aren't bitter and aren't ugly. And you find people who, somebody cuts you off on the freeway and they're nastier than that. So to see
Right.
this it's just refreshing and it's beautiful. What you said is really true. I would love for anybody to just be able to have that exposure just once. It is pretty life-changing.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the Innocence Center. I believe, and correct me if any of my facts are wrong, but I believe that it was launched in 2023, modeled after the California Innocence Project, and the mission of the Innocence Center is threefold: freeing innocent people from prison, educating the public on wrongful conviction causes, and supporting those exonerated, as they reenter society. So I want to talk a little bit about each of those today.
Sure.
But first, which of those three do you find the hardest to accomplish and why?
Oh gosh. So those three parts of the mission, and you explained them beautifully. You know, it kind of depends on what lens you're looking at it through. So of course, it is very difficult to get a legal exoneration anywhere in the country, but California is not especially tough. We do have some pretty decent laws here in California, but it really just depends on which county you're working against, usually which district attorney or prosecutor you're working against or with, the political climate of that county as well. So they're difficult in their own ways. So I would say in actually getting a full legal exoneration, that's tough no matter where you are in the US. But most innocence organizations, and I will say could be called Innocence Center, Innocence Project, Project for the Innocent, we're all part of what's called the Innocence Network. So we all have agreed to do this work for free. We do fundraising, we do events, we get some grants. But all of us who do this work, we do it for free for the client. So when we have decided that we are taking on a case, that we believe in someone's innocence, and that we have some evidence that we can use to present to a court, to present to the governor's office, whoever we're kind of speaking to get this conviction reversed, we will not ever abandon that person. And so that looks differently. So we might not get a full exoneration in
Mhm.
court, might not get a judge to say, this person is factually innocent, you could let them go. We might support them in their parole process. We might support them in a resentencing. We support all of our clients with clemency asks of the governor's office. So although for that component, for actually bringing people home, the most difficult part is getting that full legal exoneration. We have kind of found some workarounds as well. And in California, there's a beautiful law which doesn't exist in most states, where once you're out of custody, you can still fight to get that conviction reversed. Most states, you have to still be
Awesome.
incarcerated. Right. So in California, we have this great law. So oftentimes we'll help that person come home and then we'll try to get their conviction reversed. Now, in that second piece, which is around public education, which also includes all the educating that we do up at the legislature as well, which is the biggest. Well, I have two passion projects in this work, but doing policy work is one of my passions. And just last week, the governor signed two more of our bills into law.
Girl, I saw that AB 1036. I saw.
Yes,
Good girl.
yes.
And I even watched you. I was watching the hearing for a little while. And yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later because
Okay.
I do want to cover that work, yeah, that you're
Great.
doing. But keep
Yeah.
going.
And yeah, so that part of it, educating the legislature is really great. But, just educating citizens in the state of California around the causes of wrongful conviction. The challenge there is that it isn't so much the education. I think people are very interested in this movement. They're very interested in this work.
Hmm.
They're very interested in the people who are impacted by this. It's kind of translating that to when you get that jury summons in the mail, which I actually just got one the other day. I can't wait. I'll never get on a jury, but I'm going to try. When you get that jury summons that you are compelled to go, don't feel compelled to try to get out of it, to get your boss to say you don't have to go. And even if you can, if you have the means to miss a day or two of work or whatever, I always like to tell people like you could literally save someone's life by going to jury duty and being aware of the causes of wrongful convictions because there is so much data around how easily people get wrongfully convicted. And some of it is just being a person of color. That could be, the biggest thing against you when you're in a criminal trial is you're a person of color. And your jury is just people who don't look anything like you, who perhaps are
Right.
retired, who aren't in the same income bracket as you. So we need everybody who can go to jury duty, who could bring their life experiences and bring their education around the causes of wrongful conviction to go to jury duty and be an advocate in that space, right? And stand up to your peers and have discussions with your peers. So that's the kind of tough part is we can educate till the cows come home. It needs to be inspiring enough to
Hmm.
bring folks to court and volunteer for jury duty.
To trickle down, yeah.
Yeah. And then in that third bucket, around empowering people who have come home after wrongful incarceration. So there is this beautiful movement happening inside of our movement. So I think the innocence movement is kind of known out in the public as a bunch of lawyers who are working to
Hmm.
free innocent people from prison, right? But that work has been happening for 25, 30 years now. So there are thousands of freed and exonerated people who have come home in those decades who are incredible humans who just want to make the system better for the young person that's coming behind them. They want to have fair ways that those folks can also come home as well, just like they did. And so those voices are just invaluable right now in this movement. We need to be hearing from the people who went through this process what it was like and how they were communicated to,
Absolutely.
right, by their lawyer, by any kind of reentry professional that was trying to help them once they came home. What was it like when you had to wait 2 years to hear back from an innocence organization? What would it feel like if you had more contact? What was it like day one when you came home? What was it like month one, year one, 10 years out, right? Like there's so much information and lived experiences within this group of people that really should be informing the movement. And so we're seeing so many incredible leaders that are freed and exonerated people who are just starting to really populate this movement in a kind of like not a revolution, but kind of
Well,
like,
yeah, they're
yeah,
motivated. They have all the reason in the world to want to see this changed.
right, right.
And
And
there's
there's
nobody closer to it, right?
exactly,
What a
exactly.
perfect storm.
Yeah. So I just am so proud of being a part of that. And because I think everybody thinks I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. And so I get to do kind of like all the other stuff, right? Like the litigators get to do all the litigation, and I do the policy work, I do the public education, I assist with reentry and connecting services and things like that. So I get to really be around this incredible group of humans who are truly using their pain and their trauma to help the next person. And it just doesn't get like more selfless than that, you know?
Yeah, and that's not the world we live in on the daily, unfortunately. So to be able to see that um every day, what a special calling. Like
Totally.
seriously.
Yeah.
So, okay, I want to talk a little bit about the freeing the innocent portion of this. And that's basically how I mostly identified originally.
Hmm.
For example, with Anthony, we talked a little bit about him earlier, but Anthony Chidas was featured on The Real Housewives of Orange County last season.
Hmm.
And I know that correct me if I'm wrong, but Emily Simpson is an ambassador for the Innocence Center, correct? Okay.
Exactly.
So, in her capacity as ambassador, she used her ability to get out there and get everybody to watch something that, let's face it, we're talking about Orange County. So just to be able to flip the switch is amazing to me. But for her to have the impact that she had in the crossover was amazing. To hear Anthony's story, and I don't know if you know this, but he is going to come on the podcast.
Great.
So I've been a little bit gray about telling the story because I really want to hear it from him firsthand. And even the times that we've spoken, I know bits and pieces, but I really want to hear it in its entirety from his mouth.
Sure.
So I will just say that Anthony was incarcerated when he was 15 years old, correct?
Hmm.
He was convicted of murder and mayhem for a crime he did not commit, and he spent 20 years in prison for that crime. And I'll let him tell the rest of it for
Yeah.
himself. But this season, we also got to see Stephen Patterson, and he has a similar story. I talked to him at the gala. I
Mhm.
really enjoyed him. He's got a spirit that is kind of unmatched, like
Yep.
seriously.
Yep.
And now he was also arrested for and convicted or for murder that he didn't commit
Hmm.
in 2006, and he was released in 2024.
Hmm.
So you touched a little bit on it earlier in our conversation, but tell us about the process and the people involved and what happens from the moment someone reaches out to get one conviction overturned.
Mm. It's a long process. It doesn't matter kind of what state you're in. And I think there's a lot of misunderstandings as to how quickly the criminal legal system works in post-conviction land. So I think some people have a general understanding of how a trial works and what plea deals are and kind of things like that. But in post-conviction work, after somebody has been convicted, essentially, Most folks who go to trial have what's called a natural appeal. So there's an appellate attorney that looks at your case, but what they're looking at is just to ensure that your constitutional rights weren't violated during your trial. So
Okay.
they're not looking at evidence of innocence. They're making sure your attorney didn't fall asleep, the judge gave proper jury instructions, essentially just to make sure you had a constitutionally valid trial that convicted you. Now, that appeals process, unfortunately, in our state, in California, can be years, can be 3, 4 years that that process is happening. And your conviction can be reversed on direct appeal. That's what it's called. So oftentimes we won't get involved in a case if the appellate lawyer is still working on that case. And there are some exceptions. Sometimes appellate lawyers will be like, this case is crazy. You guys should look at it.
Right.
That was the case of one of our clients, Kimberly Long. It's her birthday today, actually. Happy
I
birthday.
saw that. Happy birthday, Kimberly.
Um, so that has to be finished for us to even look at a case. So like I said, that person is already in 3 or 4 years at that point. 3 or 4 years in prison where they don't belong, where they shouldn't be in the first place. We will take on a case. The person will apply to us. Most folks know about us in prison. There are 3 other Innocence Network, Innocence organizations here in California. So dependent on where you were convicted is usually the organization that will look at your case.
Hmm.
We used to just do Southern California. Now we kind of take across the state to help support the other orgs. So that has to fall into place. And then you also have to be claiming factual innocence. So for us, we don't take on cases where perhaps somebody says, I shot my gun too, but I know it wasn't my bullet that hit the person. Or we don't take self-defense cases. We don't kind of take the he said, she said sexual assault cases. It has to
Right.
be somebody who's saying, I did not commit this crime, or a crime did not occur. And that's a lot of times what you'll see in arson cases, where perhaps it was just an accidental electrical fire, but fire investigators are saying, no, this fire was set on purpose. There wasn't a crime that actually happened, right? So there
Gotcha.
either has to be an absence of a crime, or you have to be completely factually innocent of the crime. Now, of course, everybody can say that, right? We get
Sure.
thousands of letters and, our mailbox is very full. But we have an incredible team. We have a volunteer paralegal that does everything for free. She's retired. She worked at a big firm. She's just lovely. She comes in, scans all of our mail, and then we built these really wonderful partnerships with pretty big law firms across the country who then help us screen the cases. And of course, we train them and partner with them and things like that. So by the time the lawyers are actually looking at a case in our office, it has been completely worked up. So all the documents have been gathered. There's a memo that's produced by a volunteer attorney that kind of says, here's the issues in the case, here's some of the red flags. So all of our litigation time is really spent focused on litigation. That was one of the things that we wanted to reimagine essentially when we started this new organization. Like, let's not have people waiting years. Let's get to these cases
Right.
as fast as we can and as efficient as we can. And so with of course having quality control and care and things like that. But it's something that we're really proud of at the Innocence Center, that we've made these partnerships to really get to these cases faster and have our expertise used where it should be used, right?
Right.
Investigators
We're
should
not
be
wasting
investigating.
resources.
Right,
Mhm.
right. So that is how you get to our office. And I would say the shortest I've ever seen from an application received to, well, and there's different stages. So once we get an application and we decide that we are going to take on the case, that often goes into investigation land. So we haven't even agreed to be your attorney. We're doing investigation to see if we have enough to produce for the courts.
Mhm.
And then we might decide to sign on as your attorney. So that could be, I mean, at the new office, it's quicker, probably a year, year and a half. But we want to be conscious too of people once they apply that they go into the queue and we're not skipping over anybody and we're evaluating everything as best as we can. So it's quite a process. Lots of eyes on it, lots of lawyer eyes on it. We have an investigator that we work with that puts their eyes on it. So yeah, just quite a process.
That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing all of the things that go into one decision. Like, are we even going to help? You know what I mean? Can we help? Are we able
Totally.
to? Does this merit it? It's the process, the length of time, and like you said, all of the resources that go into just determining that. We're not even touching on the work that needs to be done to
Right.
actually get it done yet.
Right.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Well, you're moving the needle, that's for sure.
Yeah, we think
Yeah.
so.
So it seems to me that educating people on wrongful conviction causes is got to be kind of a part of an Achilles heel with regards to the mission, right? Because it's something that is hard to convey to people if they're not impacted, if they're not in tune, or
Mm.
if they are not open to listen. So I guess what I want to know with regards to that part of the mission is what do you want us to know? We talked a little bit about jury duty, but what other things can people do directly or indirectly to educate themselves on why this happens and what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty lucky in the timing that we're in right now because there are so many true crime documentaries and
Mm,
podcasts about wrongful convictions. And I think that if there is a case that draws just one person in, the Serial podcast was such a popular podcast, and that was all about a potential wrongful conviction. And that really drew people into this,
right.
and it kind of started this, snowball effect with things like partnering with the Housewives and things being on TV and movies and stuff like that. So right now, I think as far as the movement goes, we're in a decent place where people are more aware that wrongful convictions happen. I will say sometimes I'll say, "Oh, I work at the Innocence Center. We get innocent people out of prison," and it's, you just kind of get that stare of like, "What do you mean?" But I see that as an opportunity and a fun way to make a new friend and try to explain to them some of these causes of wrongful convictions. The other piece, and we talked about this before too, is a lot of our public education is through our events, right?
Right.
We've done with Emily and Gina, we did a drag show in San Diego a few years ago, right? And there was this whole other, demographic that like we wouldn't be able to reach usually from
Right.
our social media channels and things like that. So the public education piece is actually the fun piece because I think that's when you have the opportunity to meet people who have no idea what you're talking about. And by the time you're done talking to them, they're like, have drank the Kool-Aid, right? And they're donating or
Exactly.
they're going to jury duty. So for me, I love it, right? And I think what's funny, like in the office, we call me like the attorney translator because I'm like used to all the attorneys and all their jargon and all that stuff, but I can like translate it to just like a person who's not in the law.
Chat
And
GPT version of what was
yeah,
just said.
totally. Totally. And it's like people will, you might go and talk to one of my lawyers and, everything they're saying is just kind of like, what the heck are you talking about? And be like, let me just break it down for you. So I love that part of it. And that's certainly part of the policy work that we have to do is going to lawmakers, going to stakeholders and explaining this issue and why like our nuanced issues are so important. So I actually love the public education piece. And like I said, at our events. And oftentimes, if I go and present at a law school or something like that, I get to do that with a freed or exonerated person. And I get to spend the whole darn day with them and just
Yeah.
hang out with them,
Bonus.
Yeah, we did. I'm sure you saw Steph and Patterson did Emily's podcast. And that was like 2 weeks ago. But I drove up to Stefan's house. I picked him up. We were in the car for many hours because we were going to LA. And it's just like, and then the podcast is just stunning. He's so good. And,
That's
that's like
amazing.
such a treat for me to just like spend the whole day with somebody like Stefan.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's the give that keeps on giving,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
totally.
that's that part of the
Totally.
job. That's pretty
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we have the third part of this, and that's supporting those exonerated as they re-enter society.
Mhm.
For most of American history, people who were wrongfully convicted got nothing. No apology, no compensation, no nothing. That started to change in 1913 when Wisconsin became the first state to pay exonerees for lost years. Over time, more states followed, especially after the whole DNA rush,
Mhm.
and the evidence exposed just how rampant this was and how often the system gets it wrong. And then here in California, real progress came in 2013 and again in 2020, led by advocates from none other than the California Innocence Coalition. So today, exonerees can receive, I think the number's $140 for
Mhm.
every day they were wrongfully imprisoned.
Yep.
Tell me how the system is working in real time and
Mm.
what other support besides monetary support do you find the exonerees need and
Mm.
either lack or struggle to get?
Love that. Well, there's so much. history around the support of freed and exonerated people, and you summarized it really beautifully. And in California, we have had to make very serious changes to the law because it wasn't working. There were decades where people would get out of prison because of the way the system was set up. And you'll have to take my apologies because this is like compensation is like my baby. And so I know a lot of the ins and outs, but very generally speaking, when somebody was legally exonerated and released from prison, they were supposed to go in front of an administrative board. And that administrative board is called California Victims Compensation Board.
Mhm.
And that board is truly designed to compensate victims of crime. But because our clients, the exonerated people, are such a small population, we've had a few hundred in California that have been legally exonerated. So they're this small population. The government really didn't know what to do with them and didn't know how to process this compensation. Now, when it first started, it was a it still is a two-page form. It's supposed to be a two-page form that you fill out. My conviction was reversed. Here's all my court documents. Give me my check.
Right.
Well, what was happening for decades is they would do all of that, and this board then gets to ask the California Attorney General's office for their recommendation, whether somebody should be compensated or not. And there's standards and stuff like that that we have to use. But the burden was always on the innocent person to try to prove their innocence all over again. So they've already been through this court process for years and years and years. Their finally conviction is reversed and the charges are dropped or dismissed against them. And then they have to go and fight against the Attorney General's office, who has an immense amount of resources, who has subpoena power, who has the trial file, who has all your transcripts, who has everything. And then you have to go up against these folks. Thankfully, our folks, we represent them. And it's actually something that I can do as a non-lawyer. And it's kind of one of the things that I really, really
I
love.
would bet that's probably really like,
It's
yes.
very,
Yeah.
it's very cool. So, that was actually why we changed the law. So these law changes that we've made, 2020 was one of them. We did another one in 2023, made it so that the burden was on the state to try to prove that this person doesn't deserve
Right.
compensation.
Why shouldn't he
And
get? Yeah.
right. And we made that standard a lot higher, so they had to meet this really high standard. And since then, people have been compensated pretty regularly. If your conviction is reversed, charges are dropped, things like that. The biggest issue, like I said, is because these compensation claims live within this victims compensation board, and the victims compensation board, although the board members are sympathetic to what has happened to these folks, they're just used to dealing with victims of crime. And so there's just this disconnect there.
Hmm.
And I had to go up to a meeting actually in May, because there was a bill that was getting shepherded through the legislature that really would have changed the face of compensation in a negative way. And I kind of had to do this thing with them that was like, look, this is a privilege that you all get to compensate somebody for their wrongful conviction. And we are so stuck in this back and forth in this minutia when it's supposed to be a two-page form. Your conviction is reversed legally. Give them the money.
Right. Right.
So it's just an ongoing battle that we have. We're continuing to protect those laws. Like I said, they were trying to change that law. We fought that tooth and nail and got that killed, but can always come back. And it's always shocking because it's like, why do we want to take a step back on this specific issue? These people spend decades in prison for something
Right.
they didn't do. The least we can do is compensate them, which to your next question, doesn't do anything to make them whole, right? Money is not going to make you whole.
That's right.
Money does not make our people whole. These are talking about just Anthony and Stefan specifically. These were teenage boys who went to prison at 18, 15, 18, 19 years old. Never had the chance to learn about financial literacy, never had the chance to have their first job out of prison. All the things that we just take for granted wasn't able to get top budgeting by their parents. They were in prison. They were completely kidnapped and taken away from
Right.
any kind of growing into adulthood, right? So, then you give those people $1 million for the 20 years that they spent wrongfully in prison, they're going to have a hard time with that. And so that money situation never makes the person whole. There are other services that are included in our California laws now.
Okay.
One is reimbursement of housing. So each month you submit a form and you get your rent or your mortgage back to you. The biggest issue with that is all of those services are run through the prison system. So our clients then have to fill out a form, deal with the adult parole officer, to get these reimbursements because they're, again, this population is so small that there really isn't anywhere else to kind of shove them in for that
Right.
kind of support, right? They're also, able to have transitional services. Well, I'm using air quotes because it's the same transitional services that somebody who was convicted and spent their time would get. So nothing, no special case management, no transitional services for our folks. They can go to school for free. They can go to community college, state college, universities in California because there's an exonerated person waiver, which is really nice.
That is
But
great.
again, we don't have anybody who is teaching them how to go to a college campus and pick their classes and right. So there's this need for, and those bills are all incredible, and those were actually all passed by an organization called Exonerated Nation, who's a wonderful organization here, does a lot of policy work, does a lot of case management for freed and exonerated people around the country. So that is not a knock on those bills. The knock is on the legislature and
Right.
state for not giving more, right?
Well, this is, you know what this is giving? This is giving veterans to me. It's giving the
Yes.
same exact red tape that a
Yeah.
veteran needs to go through to get services.
That's a great point. And it's
And
the
it's,
same issue. It's PTSD. We don't know how to deal with trauma. There's like no trauma-informed care in the prisons, which is really big in our movement right now as well. So that need for wraparound services is so blaring in this movement. And it's something that we're working on in the movement. It's something that, and even in having this conversation, it's kind of reminding me like one day my legacy will be that I have created like a freed and exonerated department in the state, right? To like
yeah,
handle compensation, handle their wraparound services, get them those housing reimbursements so they're not dealing with the prison, right? Having something that's theirs so that, and the people that work there have done trauma-informed care training and, understand PTSD.
right. And it destigmatizes it too, to take it away from the
Right,
system that they spent time in that they didn't belong in to begin
right,
with. So
right.
why are we there? And
Right.
the notion, I think what struck me, I mean, a lot of things are really affecting me by what you're saying. I got chills a couple of times, but what struck me the most was these people are treated in the same way as people who did do something wrong.
Mhm.
And I get that question a lot when I talk about this organization. I get, well, they had to have done something wrong kind of thing. And I'm like, listen, I'm not saying that these people walk the straight and narrow and that oftentimes you are mixing with the wrong crowd or you're, going down the wrong, but that doesn't mean you deserve to serve time for a crime you didn't commit. And oftentimes, if we had programs like what you're talking about, because it's generational, right?
Mhm.
And so if people see, okay, there was hope, the justice system does work, then
Mhm.
it gives all of these kids who are just following a path because they don't
Right.
know any other path, it gives them some hope that maybe I want to do something different with my world and with my
Yeah.
life. And so for me, the idea that you're handed a certain amount of money and maybe a couple of vouchers for this, that, and the next, and then you're told, now go on your merry way. There are so many things that you're just not equipped for.
Right.
It,
Right.
it's almost setting you up for failure. So the work that you guys do is absolutely having an impact, and I can see it in things like the fundraiser that we did
Yeah.
because now we have Anthony getting ready to go to school, which is pretty amazing.
So cool. It's so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now tell me, without obviously divulging anything that you can't or violating anybody's confidence, what would you say that the hardest thing that you hear from exonerated people
Mm.
are? Like, what is the hardest thing that they deal with?
Oh, I mean, it's such a spectrum, right? Because it's all the things that we intuitively know. They won't be able to get a job. Nobody understands why there's a huge gap on their resume. How are they going to explain that to them? It's things as kind of obvious as that to things that aren't so obvious, like Kimberly, whose birthday it is today. She's happens to be my best friend because she would call from prison. We met that way when I was an intern, a million years ago, and now she lives just like 3 blocks down the street. So we are
That's
very
awesome.
close. It's awesome. We are very close. But I've been able to, I've had the honor of like being on this journey with her. Her specific story, which is crazy, she was convicted of the murder of her own partner. He had been murdered in their home. The prosecution's theory was insane that she had murdered Ozzy, got rid of a murder weapon, dipped herself off in a jacuzzi, dried herself with toilet paper because she didn't have any blood on her, and drove the murder weapon away because it was never found. And she was able to do that in under an hour because that was the timeline that they had created. And the judge in her case, after she was convicted at her second trial, said, "Had I been able to decide this case, I would have found you not guilty." On the record, he said that.
Wow.
Very tough judge out of Riverside, incredible guy. So when we got her conviction, so when she went away, when she was arrested, her children were 5 and 10. She was working as a nurse in an emergency room. This is like Inland Empire area. And that time frame is something that nobody ever really kind of takes into consideration in these wrongful convictions. So we do not have a speedy trial system in this country. So you're arrested, you're charged, it's years before you're going to trial. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Attorneys need more time, of course, to prepare and things like that. It's not all the system's fault, but it doesn't go quickly. And Kim's parents had some means at the time. They sold some property so that she could stay out on bail. But what you don't really realize about that time frame is she's in the news for being arrested for this murder. So she's losing all her jobs. There's no hospital, there's no emergency room, there's no anything that will keep her working. She has to have supervised visits with her children because of all this that's going on. She has to pay the person who's supervising the visits.
Mhm.
She can't get a job because she's in the news for this alleged murder that she didn't commit. So there's all this time built in on the front end. This is before anybody
Yeah.
actually goes to state prison, before they're convicted, right? So when I talk to Kim, I mean, because Kim and I are so close, I'm sure that's why it's so painful for me because I really care for her. But when she describes those times, when she describes the time that she was arrested in front of her 5-year-old son, that is probably the most painful thing I have ever heard from a freed or exonerated person. Even somebody like Stefan, who was like when he was arrested, he was 18, 19-year-old kid. He literally thought that he was going in to give information, to help,
Yeah.
to, to be helpful, and then he never left the police station. Like, it's stuff like that that really kills you. I think once our clients get into prison, it's of course incredibly difficult, and there's so much PTSD from that. There is something about that stability. There's something about them being able to have jobs, them forming relationships that not that it's not that it's easier. It's just that time frame before they're convicted
Yeah.
and then going to a trial and thinking like they're obviously going to figure this out that I didn't do it. And that's what you hear
Mhm.
all of them say is like, well, they're going to figure it out. My mom's going to come and save me. The
Yeah.
jury's not going to buy this crap. And then just to have that all evaporate, all that stuff I feel like is where I see the most pain. And my folks never get to really unpack that until they come home and are now kind of like, oh my God, all this is on me now, not just this prison time, right? There's a lot of pain there.
Oh boy.
No. It's a lot to unpack, but there's,
It's just shattering. It's just gut-wrenching. Wow. Heavy. That's part one of our two-part series, and what a first half indeed. Hearing Jasmin talk about the lives behind these cases reminds us all just how fragile justice can be and how much strength it takes to reclaim it. There's more to this story. In part two, we'll shift from heartbreak to hope, exploring new laws like AB 1036, upcoming Innocence Center events, and what we can all do to help. Plus, we've got an exclusive announcement about an upcoming Real Housewives of Orange County event and how you can be part of the change. So hit follow and come back for part two. Of course, you can learn more about the Innocence Center by clicking the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back with part two next week. And until then, I'll be here living on the verge.